Blockchain Week, and here with you, Anna Tutova, co-founder of Coinstelegram, and our guest, Arthur Breitman, who is co-founder of Tezos, one of the most biggest layer 1 blockchain solutions, and they adopt now as well a lot of NFTs, and he will talk today as well about their rollups. Great to have you here today, Arthur.
Thanks, great to be here.
So can you tell us about your background and how did you initially get into crypto blockchain space? When did you hear first about Bitcoin?
Sure, my background is largely in applied mathematics, computer science, statistics. I worked in finance, a bit of robotics, and I got interested into crypto because it was at the intersection of many centers of interest for me. The theory of money in banking, libertarian politics, distributed system, cryptography, it was, so very early on I got super interested in it, and just fell into it.
Which year was it? When did you get into it?
I mean, it was progressive. I do think I heard very early about the Bitcoin paper, but like my first experiments in the space, probably 2011.
Wow, that's quite early. And were you involved into any blockchain companies before starting Tezos?
Well, I mean, no, not really.
So how did the idea of your own layer 1 or your own blockchain solution come to you?
Well, people were wrong on the internet. People were saying a lot of silly things about proof of stake. And people were saying a lot of silly things about governance around blockchains, or rather they were talking about governance without realizing they were talking about governance. And so this idea that you could actually have a platform that could incorporate innovations from all around the space while staying decentralized was born out of that. It's like, it seemed like Bitcoin was stuck. Either Bitcoin would be captured by special interest or stay the way it was, but there was no clear governance procedure to adopt some innovations which I think are unequivocally good, like smart contracts, proof of stake, privacy-preserving transactions, scaling capabilities. And so how could you marry the two? And that was the idea behind Tezos.
And what's your current mission in Tezos?
Well, I'm trying to help the ecosystem in a variety of ways. I sit on the council of the Tezos Foundation. The Tezos Foundation is a nonprofit that acts as a sort of patron to the network. It finances initiatives for people who want to participate in the ecosystem. And in particular, some of that involves core development, and that core development has centered largely on scaling Tezos, making it faster, but also making it more interoperable, more responsive.
Great. And as well, the development with Tezos, you involved within the years. Like first, it was like a claim to make it is to make the scalable blockchain and etc. Then with the hype of NFTs, you started onboarding more creators who are making NFTs as well. You cooperate with different big brands like Manchester has digital collectibles on Tezos, as well McLaren and many other brands. So can you tell more about this and about NFT adoption on Tezos?
Yeah, absolutely. So starting in 2021, the amount of activity on the Tezos chain started really ramping up and exploding. And this, also was a time where we started thinking very seriously about scaling and how we could accommodate an explosion of usage on a chain. And predominantly that came from the art community and especially the generative art community, who really found a home on Tezos. And since then there's an absolutely fantastic artist and collector community that exists on the Tezos platform. There's a lot of platforms that they use. The most famous ones, Object.com, XXX, Theia, and there's a lot of other ones. But it's been wonderful to see this because I believe we're in an age of hype where people make up use cases for blockchain and they say like, oh, sure, your blockchain is going to do X and Y, and it's not real in the sense of like it doesn't present an advantage over centralized solution. Whereas for something like art collection, there is no other choice than having a decentralized network. Where are you going to create and own your digital art on a commercial database? Doesn't make sense. And so to see that we have seen the growth of such a a beautiful and meaningful community on Tezos is really fantastic. And like you mentioned, there's also large brands who have created NFTs on Tezos, including Manchester United and a few others.
Great. And as well, what's the biggest use case on Tezos? Are these NFTs currently, or are they?
NFTs is, I would say in terms of activity of the network, NFTs is a big one. There's also a few games who have quite a bit of active users on Tezos. DeFi has grown quite a bit in the past few months on the platform. And then there's also a background activity of tokenization, asset tokenization, which doesn't really make necessarily the news, but is still quite present on the Tezos chain.
And as far as NFTs, are this mostly creation of art, different paintings which are made into NFTs, or do you have as well music NFTs or any other use cases for NFTs on Tezos?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of music NFTs on Tezos. The platform OneOf has had a lot of music artists create musical NFTs. There's also DNS.xyz, which is a social network / platform for musicians to mint and collect and play. So it's definitely a really good place for music NFTs.
And as well, in your opinion, what is needed for the mass adoption of crypto blockchain?
Well, I think scaling is quite important. Even when you look at very, very cheap transactions, if you look at a transaction that says, oh, look, it's 0.01 cent, that may not sound all that much, but if you are a company and you have 400 million users, or if you want to target 400 million users and say you want to give them something for free where they don't have to have tokens where you pay for their gas fee, for example, well, all of a sudden, even at 0.01 cents, it starts becoming a lot. So having a tremendous amount of throughput, like far in excess of what's been offered today, I think is not, I would say, the final element for mass adoption, but an important element that's been missing so far.
And Tezos as well sponsors Manchester United and Formula One. So can you tell more about this? Is there as well one way to push the mass adoption?
So in 2021, the Tezos Foundation entered a few partnerships with some sports brands like McLaren and like Manchester United. And it's been an opportunity to have some marketing message put out there because these are brands who have very wide audiences, but also launch collectibles and also discover new ways for brands to engage with fans and serve as a point of reference for people who want to create Web3 experiences.
And what response did you get from this so far?
There's been a few 100,000 of addresses who have been created as a result of this campaign on the Tezos chain.
Yeah, that's great. And as well, you have some recent updates, like Mumbai update for the scaling, and you claim that you aim 1 million transactions per second. Can you tell more about this?
Sure. So the Mumbai upgrade actually already happened, and we're about to see the Nairobi upgrade, which is the one after that. So they're named after letters of the alphabet. So Nairobi is the 14th one.
Why did you decide to call them by different cities?
It's a common thing, actually. If you took, for example, the Ubuntu releases for the Linux distribution Ubuntu, they name them after animals, A, B, C, D. But you also see it in a lot of universities have computer rooms, and the computers will be named A, B, C, D with you pick a theme, and the theme of cities just resonated at the beginning. So it's been Athens, Babylon, Carthage, Delphi, and so on. And so Mumbai introduced Enshrine Optimistic-Rollup on a Tezos chain. What that means is any blockchain you want to run, any type of logic you want, not just a smart contract, any kind of chain you want to run, so long as you can compile it to WASM, and that gives you a lot of options. You could be a Go programmer, you could be a Rust programmer, you could be using many languages. You compile it down to WASM, and then you can run it as a rollup on a Tezos chain. So it's a scaling solution. And via these rollups, effectively, we can support a very large amount of transactions on a chain.
And as well, there are two types of rollups, optimistic and validity rollups. And,
yes.
Now there is as well a lot of talks about validity ZK rollups, but Tezos claims that they won't be scalable for at least for the next few years, and that you develop as well your own solutions in that way. Can you tell more about this?
Yeah, so there was a blog post by Nomadic Labs. Nomadic Labs has investigated validity rollups. We've built some. But whether you look at the validated rollup that have been built by the teams at Nomadic Labs or any of the solutions which are out there today, the reality is that they require a very large amount of overhead in order to compute proof because they're done in a computation model, which is not very natural. So you can do various tricks to optimize it. You could try to build custom hardware. You can optimize things a little bit, but you're still going to be 6,000 at least of times slower than if you were running natively. And that's a problem. And I think, especially if you want to unlock very large amount of throughput, it's not something that you can, this 1,000x, 10,000x slowdown is not something you can really afford. And optimistic rollup in practice, they actually are probably more complex to build than ZK solutions or validated solutions. And that can sound a little surprising because there's a lot of advanced mathematics inside those ZK solutions. But the thing is like once you've implemented those mathematics, it's kind of self-contained. You can verify your code. It's not I/O intensive, right? It doesn't manipulate a lot of state. Whereas if you look at optimistic rollups, there's a lot of moving parts. So from a mathematical standpoint, they're simpler. From an implementation and security standpoint, they're actually more complicated. But a big benefit that they have is that you have no overhead in running. So you can run your computation as fast as you want. Without having to use a weird language, without having to do anything. So they're great for interoperability, and they are great for performance.
And can you tell as well about the use of Tezos blockchain? Do you have any partnership with enterprise clients or institutionals?
Absolutely. So recently, the California DMV started using a private instance of the Tezos chain in order to register vehicle title. Well, that's one example.
Interesting.
But there's a few others. I think we have EDF in France is offering services on the Tezos chain. Google Cloud recently started offering around Tezos software. There's Canvas, which is a white label NFT platform. So if you're an enterprise and you want to deploy NFTs, it's a great way to do it. While simplifying a lot of the technology and also legal aspects.
And there were as well some tokenization examples on Tezos. Can you tell more about your thoughts on the future of tokenization?
There's something we're working on that I think is quite interesting, but I can't talk about it right now. But in general, it's just background activity.
And how do you generally see the current market?
Clearly we're in the midst of a very, very big crypto winter right now. I don't think there's any doubt about it. But fundamentally, my focus is on making Tezos the best chain it can possibly be, or at least trying to help make that happen. And regardless of the conditions, I think that chains need to be secure, they need to be decentralized, and they need to be fast.
And do you see any other trends developments which may be the next big thing, like it was DeFi, NFTs, Metaverse? What can be next?
Well, the thing is, I don't think a lot of these things were big, and I think that's a mistake to assume that they were. Essentially, what you had is a bunch of people created tokens, and then they sold those tokens to people providing liquidity in DeFi protocols. They use shell games to increase the perceived amount of TVL, being counted 10 times, and all of that disappeared. So it was big in the press, it was big that people were talking about it. Was it ever really big, or was it just, an illusion?
Still, it fueled much the bull market.
No, it felt big, I agree with you, but I think it's a feeling. Like if you look at a lot of the trading volumes, for example, of NFTs on Solana, a lot of them were being wash traded by FTX, as we've learned. So a lot of the things that appear to be big are actually quite fake.
Yeah, that's true too. Crypto is still some kind of small.
I mean, it's boring, but fundamentally, I think the big use cases of crypto we've seen to a large extent, they are stores of value, international payments, and trying to build financial primitives. I think DeFi is interesting, but DeFi, as we've seen it, has been largely a game of here's a bunch of tokens, and which are also DeFi tokens, and let's try DeFi tokens with more DeFi tokens. It is enable, I would say, trading, which has always been a use case of the space, and leverage. But if we wanted to, fundamentally, finance has to be financed in something, right? That's a problem. And right now we have finance that's not financing anything. There are challenges around that. It's actually hard to do things like security tokens, for example, and at the same time marry them with DeFi. I think there's possibilities of doing that. That could be interesting, but it's more speculative. I firmly convinced that the biggest case for adoptions are still going to be around NFT, art and culture, and gaming.
As well, is it generational issue about the crypto mass adoption, in your opinion?
I mean, generations help, of course, because people grew up, and a lot of people who are in their teens today, as far as they're concerned, cryptocurrency has always existed, right? It's existed as long as gold. People are digital natives; they've used computers from an early age, so definitely it helps. But I don't think fundamentally all that much, because a lot of people who are in the working world today, they've also used computers as children. So perhaps a generational thing in terms of policy, because policymakers tend to be much older than the active population. But aside from that, I think it's primarily an impedance mismatch in terms of what the chains have to offer today versus what people actually need.
And now we see as well a super popularity of AI applications, and you self-tweeted that you're looking for different AI use cases. And do you have any plans for the development and implementation of AI in Tezos?
Well, my background is in applied mathematics, computer science. I did machine learning when I worked in finance. I also worked directly in AI in robotics for Waymo. So I do have, I think, a strong background in AI. I was also personally quite early in investing in large language model companies. That being said, I think the overlap between blockchains and AI is small. I think there's going to be an entire grift industry around AI and blockchains. I mean, it's already there, right? There's not that much. The whole point of a blockchain is it needs to be very, very predictable, very sharp rules. You know exactly what happens. It's accounting, in some sense. Generative AI is very creative. So accounting is not the place where you want creativity. There's a few things that people have come up with, like data marketplaces. We've heard about these cases for a while, and trying to farm GPUs together for a variety of reasons. I'm not convinced with those use cases. Data marketplaces, because primarily most of the data is still by far aggregated by private companies, and trying to convince a few million people to just share a bit of their data is not going to do much, right? You're better off acquiring Reddit, acquiring GitLab. Like some of these, I think a lot of companies who right now are not profitable but have a lot of data are going to be acquired just like as training sets. And that's like far more efficient than trying to convince people to just like own your data on a blockchain. Even though, I think companies are going to say they're going to do that, and they're going to get funding by VCs who cynically think they will just dump the token on retail by telling them they're investing in AI, which is a bit a sad thing about the space, but a reality. In terms of training, it's far more interesting because there is an advantage to people at home using gaming GPUs as opposed to the more expensive professional GPUs that NVIDIA wants you to use for training. The problem is like if you train a neural net, right now you're latency bound, right? The most important thing is you have your like 5,000 GPUs is like how quickly can they talk to each other? Because you do one pass and then you want to back propagate the results. If you're trying to do this over the internet, the bandwidth is going to kill you. So using GPUs across the internet for training, at least like large language models or like these deep learning models, not going to work. Like there's some type of simulations you can do, the ones which are like very embarrassingly parallel, that can help. Like if you're doing Monte Carlo sampling, for example, potentially more interesting. If you're doing inference, which is like once you've trained your model and you're trying to deploy it, maybe the latency doesn't matter as much, or maybe like you can do inference on a single GPU, and so you essentially like farm all of this a little bit. But we've seen for decades like applications saying install this on your computer and then share your resources with the cloud. Like people have done this for a while, and in general, you still get crushed with the economies of scale of just like someone building a data center. Like even though you have this capital at home, it's just the operating costs and people just not bothering typically still favors like very large data centers. So I'm not particularly bullish on the intersection between AI and blockchains. And I know the narrative is like, oh, it's going to be the token, like you need a currency for the AI agents and all of that. And there's a little bit of a there, but not much.
So what are the interesting use cases of AI not related to blockchain for you?
I mean, everything, right? At the end of the day, if you have a replacement for human intelligence, you can automate everything, including AI research, which is when it starts getting actually quite worrying. But the very immediate ones we see are going to be, I would say, around like office productivity, email management, for example, is going to be a big one. But that's going to be captured by incumbents. You're going to see this in Gmail. You're going to see this in Outlook. Right, it's not a huge. I don't think it's going to be this huge space for startups. I think it largely benefits incumbents who have large data sets and large amount of distribution.
And there are as well some talks that like such large language models as ChatGPT may be not safe for the data because people give out put their data and like nobody knows what happens next with it. And there are as well, like for example, Mark Benioff, the founder of Salesforce, talked a lot about it, and they launched just their AI cloud in the Salesforce, which wouldn't store the data of the users. So
yeah. So if you have a ton of money and you talk to OpenAI, they'll give you your instance of this on Azure, and with segregated data, but that's only for very large players. But I think we'll see competition. I would say like there's other companies, like Google, for example, or like Facebook, who can produce models of the same quality that OpenAI has been produced, and then we even have open source models who are faring quite well here. So I think either people will use that, or they will have cloud solution that will give them this privacy. But it's true that as it stands today, if you're using GPT-4, you are giving all your data to Sam Altman. So just bear that in mind.
So can we implement somehow ZK proofs into these AI models?
No, because once you send your data, right? The proof is not going to do you all that much. ZK proof would be useful if you wanted to show the integrity of the computation, but it's just so expensive. Like you're going to pay 1,000x. So people will also say like, oh, sure, you can use homomorphic encryption, right? So you encrypt your input, and then it's sent to the model. The model just computes the output, but doesn't see what the output is, and you only can decrypt it. In theory, that's beautiful. In practice, again, the orders of magnitude of slowdown are just fiendishly high. Like it's just so much cheaper to just like buy your own computer and do it on premises if you want this type of guarantees than ever trying to do this with homomorphic encryption.
And can you share as well some future plans for the development of Tezos?
It's kind of these things where it's like, there's a lot of things that sound good, but you have to actually look at the numbers and like realize they don't really make sense. But sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so like the same question.
For Tezos?
Yeah. What's your future plans? Like the nearest goals?
Personally, like my focus is in trying to help the dev teams, in particular in scaling Tezos, like reducing latency, providing really an experience on the chain which is great in terms of user and developer experience, with a lot of interoperability, very low latency, high speed. What everyone fundamentally wants out of a blockchain. And I'm also helping with like capital allocation between different entities who are working as part of the Tezos ecosystem, and trying to make them as efficient as possible and as focused on improving the user experience as possible.
Right, yeah. User experience is quite important. Hope to see more exciting news from Tezos, and wish you good luck in your development and achieving the highest scalability.
Thank you so much.